The same paintings that people at first found sloppy and incomprehensible ended up revolutionizing art the way we see it. And this masterpiece is a notable example of that. Watch today's video to know all about it. This painting, named Impression Sunrise, was created in 1872 by French artist Claude Monet, who was considered the founder of Impressionism, an art movement that radically changed the art world in the late 19th century. But what exactly is Impressionism, and how did this painting inspire its name? Well, Impressionism was a style of painting that aimed to capture the fleeting expressions of light, color, and atmosphere on a scene, rather than the details and realism of traditional academic art. Impressionist artists painted outdoors using quick and loose brushstrokes, bright and pure colors, and often ordinary subjects such as landscapes, city scenes, and people. Experimentation with new techniques and perspectives was also an important aspect of this style of painting, such as painting from unusual angles, cropping the edges of the composition, and using complementary colors to create contrast and harmony. Now let's take a closer look at the painting itself. The most striking element of the painting is the sun. It appears as bright as an orange disc surrounded by a halo of light, a contrast with the dark silhouette of the boats and the buildings on the shore, which are barely visible in the misty atmosphere. Monet used light and color in Impression Sunrise to show the early morning time. The main colors are cool blue-gray tones, which are contrasted with the orange of the sun that is rising. We can see this orange color in the sky, which makes it warmer, and also in the reflection of the sun on the water. The scene seems to be that of a foggy morning. The colors are more important than what we can see clearly, and the subject and the formal elements are mixed. The orange of the sun is also a strong element, and it attracts your eyes. The sun also reflects in the water, creating shimmering waves of color that vary from orange to blue to gray. The water is blending beautifully with the sky, giving us an impression of unity and harmony. The painting does not have a clear distinction between the foreground, the middle ground, and the background, but rather creates a sense of depth and perspective through the use of color and light. The focal point of the composition is the sun. It is placed slightly off-center to create balance and dynamism. It draws our attention to the horizon line, which divides the painting into two equal parts, one dark and one light. Monet avoided using black or brown for shadows or outlines, which would have made the painting look more realistic and conventional. Instead, he used darker tones of blue or purple to suggest depth and distance and to create contrast with the warm colors of the sun and its reflection. He also used quick and loose brushstrokes to create a sense of movement and energy, as if he was trying to capture the moment before it changed. The sun also symbolizes the dawn of a new day and a new era. It represents Monet's optimism and confidence in his artistic vision. He is not afraid to challenge the norms and expectations of his time and to express his personal impression of reality. He was also interested in exploring the effects of light and color on different scenes and how they change according to the time of day, the season, and the weather. He wanted to show that reality was not fixed or stable, but rather fluid and dynamic. He also wanted to show that art was not only a representation of reality, but also a creation of reality. An interesting point about this composition is that there were apparently houses to the left. However, Monet did not depict these due to the focus he wanted to place on the emerging industry, which he depicted through the various ships, chimneys, cranes, and smoke rising into the air. Monet used oil paint on a small canvas measuring 48 by 63 centimeters. He applied the paint with rapid and spontaneous strokes, creating a sense of movement and energy. He also used a limited palette of colors, mostly blues, grays, and oranges. He mixed these colors on his canvas rather than on his palette, creating subtle variations and contrast. It is important to note that Monet's use of brushstrokes shows a total break from what was expected from painting in his time. Instead of smooth and precise brushstrokes that create well-defined shapes and forms, we see the actual marks from the brush that create a sense of movement and spontaneity. Some might think it looks simple and crude in its execution, as if the painting was not finished or refined. However, this was also a common feature of Impressionism and an example of how artists use the in plein air style, which means painting outdoors and capturing the scene in one session, without going back to the studio to make corrections or adjustments. Some sources also mention that scholars like Paul Smith have suggested about the painting that it may have been Monet's way of showing his individuality, meaning his personal expression and interpretation of the scene rather than a realistic or conventional representation of it. While this artistic movement was an inspiration for many, not everybody appreciated it as much. When Monet and his fellow Impressionists exhibited their works for the first time in 1874, they faced harsh criticism from the public and the press, who found their paintings sloppy, meaningless, and incompetent. One of the critics, Louis Leroy, wrote a sarcastic review of the exhibition in a newspaper. He singled out Monet's painting of the Port of Le Havre sunrise. He wrote, "Impression? I was certain of it. I was just telling myself that since I was impressed, there had to be some impression in it. And what freedom, what ease of workmanship. Wallpaper in its embryonic stage is more finished than that seascape." What he meant to do was mock Monet's painting as a mere impression, not a finished work of art. He also used the word impression to imply that Monet's painting was subjective and personal, not objective and universal. He also compared Monet's painting to mere wallpapers, which were considered a cheap and low-quality product at the time. He suggested that Monet's painting was not worthy of being displayed in an art exhibition or being called art at all. He also criticized Monet's technique as careless and lazy. Not only that, but he also implied that Monet did not put any effort or skill into his painting, but simply dabbed some paint on a canvas without any plan or purpose. Leroy wasn't the only one who had this opinion. Many others agreed with him. They accused the Impressionists of being ignorant, incompetent, and rebellious. They said that their paintings were ugly, vulgar, and offensive, and that they weren't art, but rather insults to art. They also rejected their paintings as unrealistic and incomprehensible. They said that their paintings did not represent anything recognizable or meaningful, arguing that their paintings were only impressions, not expressions. But Monet and his friends decided to embrace the term impression as a positive description of their style. They called themselves Impressionists and continued to exhibit their works under that name. They also defined their artistic vision as a valid and innovative way of expressing reality. Monet explained that he titled his painting Impression because he wanted to show his impression of the sunrise, not a literal depiction of it. He chose to paint this particular sunrise on November 13, 1872. He later recalled, "I had rented a room in which I had a window facing onto the port. I got up very early every morning. One day I realized that I could see nothing but fog. Then suddenly I saw some masts being detached from this fog. It was so beautiful. I took my palette. It was only 7 o'clock. Moving on to the 21st century, Impression Sunrise is now one of the most famous and admired paintings in the world. It is displayed at the Musée Monet in Paris, where it attracts thousands of visitors every year. Many people are fascinated by its beauty, its simplicity, and its originality. They also appreciate its historical significance and its role in the birth of Impressionism. It is also a testament to Monet's legacy and influence on the history of art. He inspired generations of artists to explore new ways of seeing and painting reality. He opened the door for other movements and styles, such as post-impressionism, fauvism, expressionism, and abstract art. He showed that art could be more than just a faithful imitation of nature, but also a personal expression of emotion, sensation, and imagination. Click on any of the 2 videos on the screen right now for more content.